Welcome back to Pen and Reel. I'm your host, Uncle Joel, and I think it's time that we take a look at Dark Knight's Death Metal in its entirety. So if you've watched any of my previous videos on Dark Knight's Death Metal, you'll know that I have very mixed feelings about this series. I think it didn't start out too well, but a lot of the tie-ins stepped up to really elevate the event into something that I felt it should have been all along. But now that the event is completely finished, how do I feel? Well, I feel like it was a very mixed bag. So in the lead up to the Dark Knight's Death Metal event, Scott Snyder really developed a lot of different things and introduced a lot of interesting and new concepts to the Justice League and to the DC Universe as a whole through his Justice League title. Now, he introduced all of these ideas to varying degrees of success. However, I think the thing that really stands out and sets Scott Snyder's Justice League apart from Dark Knight's Death Metal is he introduced these new ideas and these new concepts that other people can take and play with and really run with. Whereas I feel like the vast majority of Dark Knight's Death Metal was setting up these different pieces that can be played with and then wiping them off the table. Didn't really explore a lot of them very much, or really at all, but then kind of discarded them, and then they're not going to be really used in the future. Now, it's always possible that another writer could come back and revive some of those ideas, but that's just it, is those ideas will need resuscitation, as opposed to ideas that were simply put forward and set up for other people to use if they wanted to. Yes, this is comics. There could always be resurrections. There could always be new writers pulling from old stories, and so these ideas are never fully off the table. However, I didn't really feel like with the Dark Knight's Death Metal, Scott Snyder was actually building something. He was just kind of telling a story and not really concerned with how it played out in the future. Which one of the things that I think is very telling about that aspect of it is the fact that the tie-ins did more to develop the DC Universe as a whole as opposed to the actual event itself. We got Speed Metal really developing Wally West and providing a significant redemption for him and setting the stage for him going forward. And we got the Doom Metal tie-in, as seen in the Justice League comics, that really served to rebuild the Titans and bring them back into focus. So between Doom Metal and some of the other tie-ins, we really got a significant focus on rebuilding the Titans and bringing the original Titans to the foreground. And I feel like this really did a significant job in refocusing on the characters that we have loved for so long, and that so many people want to see back, and see really maintaining a significant status quo going forward. Within the main book of the event itself, within the issues 1 through 7, I feel like the only part that really significantly developed anything for the future of the DC Universe as a whole, or even any of the characters, was the final issue. And the vast majority of that was done in the epilogues. And I know the epilogues weren't even a part of the original book. At least they weren't a part of the original plan. Once the pandemic hit and some of the books started getting delayed, Scott Snyder went back and started adding stuff in, and he was brought back to add an epilogue to tie it into Future State and Infinite Frontier. And both of those epilogues are drawn by different artists. So if you just stick with the stuff that was actually drawn by Greg Capullo, honestly, the vast majority of this series I felt was fairly insignificant overall to the greater DCU. Personally, I wasn't too thrilled with it. I'm happy we got the event because of the different tie-ins, specifically the stuff with the Titans and the stuff with Wally West. But the main story and just the overall concept of the event, I feel like was fairly poorly executed. One of the significant issues I had with it was that with the entirety of Scott Snyder's run on Justice League, we had a significant build-up towards these entities who are going to judge Perpetua. And then one of them shows up on just a few pages in the final issue of the entire series, and we don't really get a whole lot from them. I'm not necessarily expecting to see the fallout from the event within this book. It's pretty standard for things like Crisis on Infinite Earths to wipe away the entire multiverse and then focus down on just a single Earth, and then have that explored in the books coming afterwards. Likewise, in Infinite Crisis, reestablish the multiverse, but you don't see that in Infinite Crisis. In fact, you don't even see that until the end of 52. So I'm not looking for the full fallout or all of the consequences of this event. However, I am looking for some of the fallout from the entirety of Scott Snyder's Justice League run up until this point. I wanted more time spent with the hands, as he calls them, the cosmic entities who were going to judge Perpetua. I felt like they should have had a more significant role in the event instead of this looming threat that shows up and, they're kind of nice and they work with Wonder Woman and the end. Now, on the plus side, this does provide more opportunity for those characters to be explored in later books and other writers picking up on those concepts and playing with them and doing more things, the same way that Scott Snyder went back and took characters like the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor and expanded upon them. But I don't necessarily want just a bunch of very tiny setup and waiting for other people to play with it. I want to actually see those concepts explored a bit more. But even just for the main story, I'm kind of tempted to go back and just read through just the main issues by Scott Snyder and none of the tie-ins. But from my recollection of it, I feel like there was a lot of stuff that wasn't developed or utilized well. For instance, Superboy or Superman Prime felt fairly pointless. He was introduced as though he was going to be this significant player in the event, and he wound up standing alongside Superman and the heroes, and that was it. He didn't really play a significant role. He didn't really do much of anything. Now, the single tie-in issue that he got was, I feel, phenomenal. That was a book that actually brought me to tears at the end of it. And I'm probably going to do a dedicated video just for that single issue. But again, without that tie-in, he had no significant role within the main event. I feel like Scott Snyder was very focused on setting up these big, cool moments without really concerning himself with the purpose or the ramifications of it. He just wanted to do a bunch of really cool stuff and then quickly move on. And that's really what the entire event felt like to me. It was just set piece after set piece and cool moment after cool moment, and that's it. Which, without the greater context and without developing any of it, for me, those cool moments felt lacking. If they were properly built up, I feel like they could have been the cool moments that he was wanting them to be. But as it was, it felt more like fan art, which I guess would be the best way I could say it. It's like a movie that quickly introduces a character, says, hey, you're supposed to care about them, and then immediately kills them off. You're not going to be attached to that character for that to be an emotional moment. It's not going to affect you. Whereas if it was spent half the movie really building up this character, that might hit you, and that could be very moving. And I feel like that's the difference here with Scott Snyder's writing as a whole for this event. This event feels like quick introduction, big moment, and move on. And so there is no weight to the moment, and thus there is no impact. And so the only moment that really has any significant impact in my mind is the finale. And since I didn't care about so much of it leading up to it, the finale didn't really have any weight. And in a sense, it was kind of lackluster to me. And I think one of the problems that I had with there feeling like there was any significance to this event as a whole is the fact that it was set in an alternate world. We had the DCU that we knew wiped away, and we got the Metalverse brought in, and we are now experiencing this event and living in the Metalverse, but we don't even really explore it or live in it all that much. And we just kind of move from set piece to set piece, and we're supposed to care about the fate of this world. And they say it's Earth Prime, but it's not really Earth Prime, it's Metalverse now. And then it's fairly safe to assume that afterwards, the Earth kind of goes back to what it was, and at least in that we have Gotham and Metropolis and Paradise Island and all of that. And so we were pulled out of what is familiar and what we might care about and put somewhere that we have no familiarity with and we don't care about. And so the stakes just aren't there for me. And so the stakes could have been there if it had still been set within the DC universe that we already know. And so the fact that we didn't really get to spend much time actually living within this world I feel was a very big missed opportunity. Let us see what life is like in the Metalverse. Let us really spend time living there. And I feel like some of the tie-ins could have done a much better job of that. That was one of the things that I liked about Doom Metal, is it slowed down a bit and made you really feel like you were actually exploring the ruins of this world. And so my one hope is that this could now be one of the worlds out in the multiverse, and we might explore it further in the future and actually get to spend some time living in the depths of it. And I think my biggest problem with the series was the fact that it was billed and treated as a Wonder Woman story, but as a whole, it didn't really feel like it was a Wonder Woman story to me. It felt like it was this DC Universe story, and Wonder Woman just happened to be the character that was traveling through the story. Yes, Scott Snyder set her up as the leader of the heroes, and she was the one calling the shots and pushing the plot forward. And so technically, because she was the main character, it was a Wonder Woman story. But if you look back at Dark Knight's Metal, the original event by Scott Snyder, that was very much a Batman story, and it was really built around Batman, like the Batman Who Laughs and the different evil Batman. It was very much a Batman-centric story, and the world and the tale was really built around him in a way that this event was not built around Wonder Woman. I felt like Wonder Woman got some cool moments, like with the invisible chainsaw and the way things were developed with her at the end. And Scott Snyder did some stuff to make it kind of focused on her more, and that she was kind of the avatar of truth. And so that was significant, and it did propel the story forward a bit, and made me a bit more comfortable with it being considered a Wonder Woman story. But as a whole, it felt like it could have been a Superman story in the same role, and it would not have been significantly different. And I really didn't like the golden goddess Wonder Woman. I felt that was pretty cheesy, like a lot of this event was, and really fell back on some very tropey ways of doing things. This is Super Saiyan God Mode Wonder Woman. And personally, that stripped some of the stakes of it for me. It went from being this underdog tale of the heroes are losing and they don't really have much hope, but they are doing everything they can, fighting tooth and nail to try to defeat this unimaginably powerful villain and surpass these unsurmountable odds, to all of a sudden now Wonder Woman is a god and she is throwing planets at the Batman Who Laughs, or Darkest Night, or whatever he's called. And so when it got bumped up to that scale, it just kind of lost the stakes for me. I do appreciate how it played out in her interaction with the hands, but again, I felt all that was underdeveloped, and given that I wasn't invested in everything leading up to this point, it just didn't have the impact that I feel like it should have. So overall, I would say that this event was just a jumbled mess. I was not happy with it as a whole. There are a number of individual parts, specifically tie-ins, that I did really enjoy, but I feel like they were in spite of the main event. Books like the Superman Prime tie-in and the Speed Metal issue focused on Wally West, like both of those could have been done outside of this event, and I feel like it would not have really lost a whole lot. They would have had to come up with a different setting for those books, but I don't feel like that would have been asking for too much. So in the end, I would say this event really wasn't that great, and if you haven't read it and you're considering picking it up, personally, I would say it's a pass. It's really not worth the money and the investment. There are a few individual tie-in issues that might be worth reading, and I will put those up on the screen now, the ones that I would recommend. Otherwise, I would say maybe at the end of the year, the collected edition will be discounted down to $5 or $10, and it might be worth picking up that way if you're really curious and want to read it, but it's not worth the investment, especially for the entire series. But even just the main book, it's not worth it. But if you have read the book, what did you think? How did you feel about the event as a whole? And how did you feel about just the main series? Issues 1 through 7 of Dark Knight's Death Metal. Am I being a bit too hard on the series? It's entirely possible that I might enjoy the book a lot more if I go back and read it now, knowing what I know, and just kind of going along for the ride. I'm not a big fan of that type of book, so I don't think I'll enjoy it a lot more. But maybe you're better able to just buckle in and go along for the ride, and thus you might enjoy it more than I did. Yeah, just let me know what you thought down in the comments. I'm very curious to hear other people's perspectives on this event as a whole. If you could help me out by hitting like and subscribe, I plan on doing a little bit of future state stuff. I don't want to dive too deeply into that whole series, but I am going to do Swamp Thing and Immortal Wonder Woman at the very least. Maybe some others, we'll see. Until next time, this is Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.